So let's go to Southern Ontario now. Thanks, Justin Dunk, for being patient, getting with us. How you doing, my man?
I'm well, guys. Hope you can hear me. We got the connection good now.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So, Justin, I do have questions for you, but please tell me as we sit here on this Friday, May the 15th, what's the latest in your world at 3 down amidst the crazy times?
Well, let me jump in with what you guys were talking about last hours of looking at alternate ways for the CFL to have a future, because I'm with you guys. I need to look at all options. Number one, and I've talked to some few people around the league about this, and guys that were in the XFL too, why don't they at least approach Vince McMahon? He's always wanted to have a football league, and he actually, as you guys well know, wanted to hire former CFL commissioner Mark Cohen to be the commissioner of the XFL. McMahon's got deep pockets, and I think maybe in his mind he would want to expand it to the United States. And I think right now St. Louis could be a perfect city. They want to show the NFL up. They're upset that the Rams left town for Los Angeles. And I think Vince McMahon could be a great guy to at least approach and see about his interest in the CFL, just because we all know he's wanted a league for so long to be successful.
So is that just basic spitballing, you and your boys sitting around talking type thing, or is there anything to it, do you think?
Well, that's just spitballing right now, but it makes a whole lot of sense. So we'll see if indeed that comes to fruition. Now, at that point, it would have to talk about how the whole scenario would work. But we know two things. McMahon has money, which is huge right now, especially if they end up not getting anything from the government, and he loves football. Those two things make complete sense.
So how often are you getting asked if there's going to be football this year in the CFL?
Every day, man. You talk to coaches, players, GMs, personnel, man, everyone around the league at the league office are wondering, can we play? What's going to happen? And I continue to tell them, as I'm sure you do too, Roddy, that I have no idea. Even though you think I have all this intel, I can't tell you what the coronavirus is going to do. So overall, there's obviously a number of discussions going on. And early on, I had heard the idea, and I believe I said it on your show a number of weeks ago, of playing in two separate areas, maybe one west, east, and then talking to some executives this week, and they were saying, could potentially Saskatchewan, because I believe out of the provinces that have CFL teams, they have the lowest number of COVID-19 cases, maybe house the entire CFL for part of the season that they're going to play. You have Mosaic there, and if you needed to practice fields up in Saskatoon, it would be a lot cheaper. Put the players up in, let's say, those students are going to be doing online courses at least for the fall. So I think a lot of those scenarios would make sense and could actually save the CFL money instead of putting the players up in hotels.
We got most of what you're saying. So on the quarantine city concept, I just saw the TSN Insiders comment, 3-minute drill on that. How serious do you think it is?
Well, right now it's really just in the discussion phase. It's an idea because it would still involve all of the safety guidelines and logistics that you have to follow. The top among that would be, how do you get these American players back over the border? Because it's going to be closed now for the foreseeable future. So it's definitely being discussed. It hasn't been passed down to the president's level just yet, but it's one of the options. I've been told a couple of weeks ago that there were sort of 12 on the table that they were working through in terms of looking at playing at games in 2020.
On the COVID thing, but a different sort of offshoot of it, how about the American players, whether they should be subject to federal aid or not? What are the guys telling you?
Well, I just really don't understand how the members of parliament in this country speak without doing the research, that the American players pay taxes in Canada and in the United States on the salary that they make in the Canadian Football League. And there are lots of other examples out there of people, let's say, from outside the country coming to Canada, either working here or paying taxes, that are probably getting the benefits of some of the government relief right now for COVID-19. So I really don't understand how you can separate the Canadians and the Americans for the CFL, because it's a mix, as we well know, that has made this league a great one.
I know I'm jumping all over the place, but here's another one for you. You reside in the GTA or I believe the 905 area code. You see the Ontario government saying no money for CFL teams provincially. What is the temperature of the population down there with regards to the CFL getting federal aid or provincial aid?
It depends where you are, and I believe that was Lisa McLeod, and she said that essentially right now they're not focusing on a, quote, bailout for the CFL. They're looking for federal direction because they feel like the league stretches across this country, as we well know, so that direction needs to come from them before they go to the provincial level. As for people that I've talked to, mostly in the Hamilton area when I'm doing my CHH sports anchorings on the weekend, they are mostly supportive of it because they believe the CFL is a sort of fabric that binds our country together and creates a lot of economic activity, right? Randy Ambrosi, when he was doing his presentation, noted that it's $1.2 billion of economic activity the CFL creates per year. But the other argument that you get is at a time like this, when obviously health and safety are paramount, how are you going to give money to a sports league that admittedly, there are some public owners, obviously you guys know that well in Saskatchewan, how that all works. But the private guys, a lot of them have been successful in other businesses. So the government's going to have to parse that all out. And that's part of the reason why Ambrosi was taken to task a little bit for not having that plan when he went in front of the government. He should have laid all that out and not left any questions for the government, but then they started poking holes in the presentation.
Frankly, I agree with that too. And the other thing that I think people in Western Canada, where the bulk of our viewers need to get acquainted with the name Bob Bratina. Justin, you would know him well. He was the voice of either the Ticats or the Argos for 20 seasons. He did both teams. Now he's served 2 terms as a Liberal MP. He was the mayor of Hamilton. He's a good friend of mine. And you guys have had some pretty good articles with Bob and interviews with him. I guess it was he was on with Bubba O'Neill, and you guys had the quotes on 3 Down. But he just said, this is the way the CFL should have approached the government. And it sounded like, although Ambrosi wasn't interested in Bob's advice, that's what Bob said, maybe there's a chance to revisit it. Like, this horse isn't out of the barn entirely, correct?
Exactly. I think there's still a long way to go. And the interesting part about what you're referencing with Bob Bratina is that Ambrosi called him and was just looking more of his support in the back room, let's say. He wasn't necessarily looking for his advice, which in actuality, Bratina, knowing the CFL and admittedly having a love for it, as you said, being the Ticats radio play-by-play man for a long time, that he could have given Ambrosi some advice on how to approach the government, because Bratina made that switch. He went from being in the CFL to a government official, and of course, as you mentioned, the mayor of Hamilton. So there could have been that approach at that time. I don't think just because Ambrosi fumbled the ball the first time that means that it's a dead issue. It just created a number of questions that the government isn't going to want to have to answer, or at least have the chance to poke holes into. Now you can go back to the drawing board, and I really think they got to cross, as cliche as it is, every T, dot every I when they go into that next session, potentially with the government, and make a pitch and have it all right. Leave nothing to chance. Have all those questions answered. You got to cover all your bases, just like a game plan. You wouldn't go into a game unprepared, and a lot of people felt like, for better or for worse, that's what Ambrosi did.
That's certainly what it looked like, and if that wasn't the case, I'd like to hear from somebody to tell me why that wasn't the case, and I haven't heard that yet. But one other thing, Justin, it's tough because this is what people see. This is what I'm hearing. Travis Lulay leaves the BC Lions. Jeff Hunt leaves the Ottawa Red Blacks ownership group. Anthony LeBlanc leaves the Atlantic Schooners ownership group. We've had players retiring here in Saskatchewan, one in Edmonton. It literally looks like people are fleeing the ship. Is that as it seems, or coincidence?
I just happen to think right now it's coincidence. And, Jeff Hunt was pretty, staunch in saying that he wasn't leaving because of COVID-19. He had felt he had taken the Red Blacks as far as he could, and also the Ottawa 67s there, and wanted to focus on Atletico Ottawa, the new CPL team that's there. Lulay leaving, I think, is its own case in itself. Obviously, the family business and wanting to stay close to home to his family. So I think it just happens to be a coincidence. But when outsiders look at that, they might not see it. And that's one of the reasons why, and I hate to go back to it, the CFL's got to explore all avenues here. It's clear that their business model is broken. That needs to be fixed. So I don't think it would be out of the question for them at least to have a conversation with a guy like Vince McMahon or other people. And one other issue, guys, that I'll bring up and talk about a little bit is you have these franchises that sometimes are paying general managers and coaches not to coach or do their job for them for a year or two. Like, let's say, for example, when the Saskatchewan Roughriders got rid of Brendan Taman and Corey Chamblin, That was probably over $1 million they were paying those guys for a decent amount of time per year, I believe it was, not to work for that team. So some of this, the losses that they're talking about, is self-inflicted. And that's why I really believe you need to go back to the table and look at it and say, hey, how can we be a profitable CFL that is better in the long run?
Lower salaries. Boom. That's it. You can't have guys like Trestman and Jim Pop. I love them both, but making 600, 700,000 Huff, you just can't. It's out of control because the numbers aren't there. By the way, Clark has brought up a reminder here. He says, can you ask Justin about the report of the CFL teams funding the Alouettes? Can you tell our viewers about that maybe hadn't heard?
That's right. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people were asking, well, how are the Alouettes staying alive? Well, it turns out that every team last year was paying a little over $600,000 to keep the Owls going. Now, Roddy, that actually serves as a prudent potential financial point for what we were just talking about in the last question, that if you think of and add that up, that every team was putting in, roughly over $600,000, and I think the total ends up being $5.2 million, that if the Alouettes were able to run on that type of budget, now they might have taken other losses too, but I'd be curious to have the books opened up and say, these franchises can be run on potentially tighter budget, and that's probably going to be the way of the future. So if the Owls could have ran on over $5 million in 2019 and make the playoffs, then why can't some of these other teams do that and bring down those losses? And then that way you probably wouldn't have to go to the government for as much money right now.
Really good point. Before we let you go, what are you working on at 3 Down today?
So I'll just tell you guys, the latest and one of the most intriguing storylines that we've had up on 3 Down Nation was the Toronto Argonauts adding DeShone Kizer, a former second-round pick of the Cleveland Browns, a quarterback, to their negotiation list. Now, I know we were talking a bunch of doom and gloom about the league, but if we ever get going again, the Argos have some connections to the University of Notre Dame where Kizer rose to star status with the Fighting Irish. Darius Jackson was a quarterback there at Notre Dame. He's currently their offensive coordinator. Tavares Daniels, a star receiver that they signed in free agency and a friend of the RP show, is now an Argo as well. So they're hoping that they can put a recruiting pitch together here and get Kizer north of the border, guys. And dare I say it, you get a name like that even my buddies that all love the NFL and that I played university football with at Guelph normally don't watch the CFL. Put a guy like Kizer like that in Toronto, and that might start to gain some intrigue of the Argos. So that's the latest that we have on up the site.
Whoa, here's just hoping they can get him there for and getting him on the field. Awesome report, Justin. Thank you. We'll be reading your stuff all weekend. Good to hear from you, and thanks for your patience.
You bet, guys. Anytime. Glad to be on with you, and stay safe out there.
You too. Justin Dunk from 3downnation.com and CHCH TV in Hamilton.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.